Computerized, oh baby, computerized, oh baby, a beautiful love. Hello, my name is Krystal Williams, and I will be presenting on the topic Accurate Advocacy for Your Music Classroom. Just to tell you a little bit about myself, I am a music educator of 16 years residing in Maryland. I am currently the Maryland Music Educator Association's Large Ensemble Chair, and I also serve as the Professional Development Chair for the Association of Black Women Band Directors, also known as ABWBD. And of course, I am a Music First Ambassador for all of the wonderful apps and things that I will be sharing, some of which today in my presentation about advocacy. Let us begin. Our agenda for today. One, we'll be talking about Advocacy 101 and hopefully giving you some quick tips and tools on how to advocate for your program and where to begin. In that Advocacy 101, we'll be discussing digital content and the collection of exemplars that you can use to garner more support for your program. We'll be talking about how you can use technology integration to produce deliverables that can be easily shared with those stakeholders and engage more support. And finally, music projects that are easily shared to your community, stakeholders, parents, and in particular, your students. With advocacy, we first must look at this circle. We must clarify the context, if you will, of advocacy and how all of those domains work together in order for you to be able to give the most support for what it is that you do day by day. Now, most music educators, we know that we are very passionate about what we do, but often our stakeholders don't know what in the world we do beyond our classroom, or even more so in the classroom. We always deliver products, but we never share the product. So let's first start by inspiring purpose. How do we inspire purpose? Well, you got to sell your classroom. You've got to have content that, just like in social media, that people are willing to engage with. From there, we crystallize the intent of what we're doing. Now, of course, we all love to say that we are doing this for the children and we are educating children, but we're also doing it to make the world aware of the different levels of artistic work that our students can produce. We cultivate collaboration when we advocate. And how do we cultivate collaboration? Well, first, we must be willing to share our works with each other, and students must be able to work together to have a product that most people will be willing to engage in. And we're going to show that by activating ways of working together. And then we inspire purpose in more people as we reach out and gain more advocates. We're going to create spaces to share student work. How we do that? Well, creating class websites that can contain some of those work items. And class websites become a multiple facet for communicating with stakeholders. I also encourage that the more innovative you are in your instructional practices, the more willing people are to support what it is that you do. We've all sat in PDs where it's boring and we're ready to go to sleep. And we've all sat in meetings where we don't even know why we're there. Well, to be an effective advocate, your stakeholders must know why they're there. And that's why we started the beginning of that circle with inspiring purpose. Let's talk about the digital or the technology that we are going to use to inspire that purpose. Well, one, I have an essential question for you when it comes to technology. How are you using technology to engage your students? Hopefully, some skills you've gained from the pandemic, you have kept. We didn't need to throw the whole baby out with the bathwater. And yes, we know that student engagement looked variously different from classroom to classroom, especially when it came to the arts. but we can use technology to continue to engage our students now that we are face to face. One app that I love to use for student engagement is called Soundtrap. Soundtrap is basically a digital audio workstation, or a place where my students go where they go to make beats. Students can create musical tracks with little to no um, compositional know-how, because Music First has a built-in database of different sound files and clips that are free for students to use as long as they have a school subscription. However, there is a free version of Soundtrap that students can use, and you can use yourself to engage. Well, how does this gain advocacy? Well, it's very easy to share a sound file. I mean, we have TikToks and we have all of these we have YouTube and we can share clips. Well, because on Soundtrap, students can easily download and present their work, it's easy when it's time to have a budget meeting to be able to share a file. Let me share one of the student exemplars with you that they did this year. Just to give you a little background on the project, the students were giving a project to create a soundtrack for a action scene in a movie, something that almost all of my students can identify with. Well, this student decided to create a chase scene. Let's take a look, or I listen, I should say. How exciting is that? Play that at an assembly or showcase that during a school meeting, and you'll see, oh, this is some cool things that's happening down in the music wing of our school. And these are things that stakeholders, when it's time to donate funds or resources, they're more inclined to say, hey, maybe this class needs laptops that all students can use, or iPads. Let's look at another way that technology can be used to garner support of what your students are learning. The next app I'm going to talk about is a Music First app called Noteflight, and it is for composition as well. I believe that the composition or the create standards for NAFME are some of the toughest to tackle because students have to be vulnerable. And often, if we're just talking about pencil and paper, it's a little harder to put your ideas on paper. So using an app like Music First, which is a lot more student friendly than some of the other composition apps. And here's a little exemplar from one of my students, just to give you a little background. I wanted to start AP Music Theory at my school. And to be quite honest, starting AP classes can be fairly expensive. The school has to invest in the curriculum, textbooks. And so when I brought up the idea, to be quite honest, my administrators weren't so sold on the idea. Well, of course, we know that AP classes increases school support when it comes to their report card and college and career readiness, but I still had to try to sell them on the idea of this being a useful class beyond the college and career readiness. So I have a student. This student name is Alex. Alex, after learning about the 12 variations of Mozart's Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star, gave a suggestion and I listened. The suggestion was to give a project where students had to create their own variations on the theme of Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star. Just to give you a little background, Alex was in AP Music Theory this past year, and Alex scored a 5 on the AP exam, which is the highest score that you can receive. To date, this year, my first time teaching AP Music Theory, I had no student score below a 3, which is quite impressive for your first run. Well, here's a little bit of Alex's Twinkle, Twinkle, Swinging Star. Isn't that a nice chord to put at the end of the song? Well, this shows a whole lot of skills. One, the student's compositional devices that he can use, his creativity. And just to let you know, this student also has received a full ride to Peabody Institute, highly coveted. So what administrator would not get behind um, the results of being able to see what happens when we invest in our music classes instructionally? Now, I'm going to share with you another device I use to garner support with my program. And this is one that some of us only became familiar with during the pandemic. However, it's a practice that I've been doing for a number of years. And it's called flipping the classroom. Flipping the classroom just simply means that you're giving activities that students normally would spend a bulk of their time in class doing at home or outside of the instructional time. It allows you to have differentiation in tiered instruction, prepare students for auditions and solo ensemble, have students self-assess. You can have individual student check-ins, student-centered assignments, and of course, SEL. For our students who have anxiety or sensory sensitivity, being able to do assignments that are performance-based at home often allows them a safer space to be creative and vulnerable. Student ownership, students knowing that these assignments, when they go home, are going to be highly graded and they're going to be put on presentation. And last but not least, parental support at home. And we use various things like to track progress, such as Google Forms and things that students can turn in to showcase what they have done or completed at home. So here's a student, Kenya. Kenya is a 2021 graduate, and she only had been playing the flute for 2 years, which meant one of those years was during the pandemic. Well, let's take a listen to Kenya's progress from just scales down to being able to have an audition ready that she created virtually on her own for solo ensemble and of course college. So scales are a simple way to get students to do things at home. However, that's not as engaging. Back to the Advocacy 101, you've got to sell your classroom. So being able to send student-centered assignments, or in this case, repertoire home, allows this student to showcase what she had learned on her own. And I'm sure if she has anybody at home and they recognize the song that she's playing, they're going to be more open to support your program, especially when they see the product in their own home, or in this case, in this student's bedroom. Now, just to add a tag in, it's nothing like a little reread to show a little culturally responsive teaching as well. This student chose the song, and I'm sure because she's practiced something at home that is recognizable, she's more apt to play and perform in front of other people. Last but not least, here is Kenya's solo audition. She submitted this, and she even did all of the technology with the wording and the titles on the screen. Now, what she's using is Music First, which is, I'm sorry, she's using Practice First, which is a music first app that she used as her backing track. And all I had to do was put the XML file in there and send it to her. And it allowed her to do all of the audition prep on her own. So back to advocacy. When we can see what's happening in your classroom beyond the four walls of your classroom, it opens up our domain to allow more people to engage. And when we allow more people to engage, that audience is now part of our advocacy crew, or what I call we've created agency. I have an essential question for you. Are you engaging learners to be self-motivated and independent thinkers? Well, that is a large part of advocacy because your students are going to be your biggest advocates. So when they're self-motivated and independent thinkers and they go and do things on their own, it allows us to have more advocates in our corner. So group work. Group work is something that I've learned is an easy way to get people to pay attention to what's happening in my classroom, where I'm not actually giving any instruction at all. I am just a facilitator and the students are driving the car. Let's take a listen to two students who they needed to work on something. They wanted to work on a part of their music, and this just required a laptop and a subscription to Music First. Let's take a listen. Now, if you notice, this is a senior working with a freshman trumpet player, and she's trying to give her pointers on what to improve. Now, if I was an administrator and I walked by and I saw this, I'd be blown away because, first of all, the teacher is not doing the assessing, it's the student, and it's a student leader. And when we talk about advocacy, when we're building those soft skills in our students, they in turn make your program look a lot better. It's not, can't just be you on the podium all the time. What's the evidence that what you're doing, your students are really sold on? So back to Advocacy 101, we have all this digital content. And I hope that you're not just recording the polished product, but the processes as well, because it's the process that allows people to know what type of work you're doing in your classroom and how difficult sometimes it is to get there. So once you have all those digital products, where do you put them? How do your stakeholders get access to these things? Well, first, I always start with a class website, something that I can easily manage. In this case, it's a Google site that I use for my previous high school, and I put a lot of things on it. Let's take a look at the things that I include on my class websites that stakeholders to engage with. What you're looking at is, let's make sure we're sharing the correct screen. What you're looking at is a Google site that I created as the band director of Western High School. So just some things that you see on this site. On the home page, we have a little information about myself. This is something that I can really easily share with advocates. It had student lesson plans and projects that my students had completed for the end of the unit. Also show that I am thinking about college and career readiness by having a landing page of colleges that my students were interested in and the contact information for those directors. When we talk about my premier ensemble, the Doves Band, I keep up-to-date content and a little information from student auditions to previous performances, even our motto, which is DOVE, dedicated, optimistic, vibrant, and educated. I use these tools because if I'm sitting in a meeting or I'm sitting at a place where I see the opportunity to gain some agency and gain more advocates for my program and more support, I could just send them a text with the link to this site. And I could say, look at the wonderful things that my students are doing. So my last essential question for you: do your stakeholders, supporters, administrators, parents, and students see the benefit of what you bring to the table? If not, then it might mean that you don't have enough access to your classroom and the projects and the different products that your students are producing. Let's take a listen to our last product that I'm going to share. And this was our virtual performance. This was a collaboration project I did with Morgan State University alumni, and it was actually pretty easy to put together. I just needed a recording, and the guest artist, she just recorded herself singing on top of it. And this is what we got. This was one of our more popular projects during the pandemic, and it allowed us to get a lot of scholarship money for students, as well as different grant opportunities from stakeholders. So back to that essential question. If you haven't been able to showcase what those things that you do best, you educate, you inspire, you create the next great minds of the world. If you haven't found the space to share those, I encourage you to use technology to share that space, especially since that's the way that the world is moving. It's so easy to share a link. It's so easy to share a QR code. So when you're building advocacy and accurate advocacy, make sure that you're showcasing what it is that you do best and that you're keeping track of those things every step of the way. Again, my name is Krystal Williams, and hopefully you have taken a lot from this presentation today.